Hi, I'm Bob Weir with the Cross Timbers Gazette, and my special guests today are Kathy Duke and her son Danny. And the reason they're here today is to talk about a condition that they both share, and that is diabetes. And I want to give some information about diabetes to the viewing public, and also to let them know that this month of November is National Diabetes Awareness Month. So thank you for being here, Kathy and Danny. And Kathy, if you would begin by telling us a little bit about the types of diabetes and the one that you and Danny have.
Well, there's two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Danny and I both have type 1 diabetes. You want to explain the differences?
In type 1 diabetes, your pancreas is completely shut down and it does not work. And what your pancreas does is release insulin and also glucagon, which are different enzymes that break down sugars and proteins, and they regulate your blood sugar in the body. And type 2 is where your pancreas works a little bit, but not enough to make work on its own, and you have to take medication, which could be pills, or you could also take insulin to regulate.
And now the insulin that you take for this, is how often do you have to take it?
You have to take it on average maybe 3 or 4 times a day, depending on how your blood sugar runs that day and what you eat.
You could take even 6, 7, 8 times because you take a shot for every time you eat and every high that you might have, and at the end of the day for your long-acting insulin. So it just varies with each person.
And is this an example of the
Yes. This is the insulin that we take after every meal when we take our insulin.
And it's done through a hypodermic.
Yes, sir.
All right, you mentioned the eating, and I was wondering what type of diet, is there a special type of diet for diabetics?
Well, not really a special type of diet, because for type 1 diabetics, you count carbs. So Danny was diagnosed at an early age, and I wanted to make sure he could be treated as any other child. So if he wanted that brownie or birthday cake, he could have it. So we count carbs. So you take insulin for every so many carbs in your diet. Now, as a diabetic, yes, you should eat a healthy diet, but you don't have a specific diet that we have to follow.
And do you typically eat 3 meals a day? Well, what would happen if you skipped a meal, for example?
You typically do eat 3 meals a day, and if you skip one, your blood sugar might go low because you don't have enough glucose and sugars in your body. So you want to eat 3 a day.
Are there organic foods that you eat regularly, or does that help in the diet? I know very little about it. So.
No, some people say that organic foods are better, or they'll say cinnamon and different things, but we just typically eat like a mainstream family.
So tell us when you first realized that Danny had diabetes.
Well, Danny was just a baby. He was 14 months old, and it was Memorial Weekend when we diagnosed him. He had been crying and fussing all day, and I noticed he was wetting through his diapers, and he woke up about 10:30 one night, and I was holding just a Diet Coke that I was drinking, and he took it out of my hand, which he never did that, and he drank about half of my Coke, just sitting there because he was so thirsty. Because that's one of the symptoms for diabetes. When your blood sugar's high, you're very thirsty, you might have leg cramps, you're very fussy, get very, very cranky, things like that. And so I checked his blood sugar, and it showed up as high on a meter, which is over 600.
And Danny is now 14 years old, and what school do you go to, Danny?
I go to the Marcus 9th grade campus.
Oh. And again, back to food and meals. What if you go to a restaurant? Is there a certain menu that you would avoid, or is there certain foods that you have to be careful of?
Each person knows their own body, so you know if carbohydrates are harder for you to process. Maybe you don't want to eat as much pasta. When we go to a restaurant, sometimes we'll ask if they have their carb count on an item. And nowadays you can pull up your smartphone pull up menus for almost every restaurant and see what carbs for every meal is. And so we're able to see the carb count on that meal, whether it's from Sonic or Texas Roadhouse, and be able to take insulin that way. Now, each person is going to make good choices about dessert. We don't tend to buy desserts at restaurants, things like that. We know what affects us more and what doesn't.
What about exercise? Is there an exercise regimen that is prescribed for diabetics?
There's not really an exercise regimen necessarily for type 1. Type 2, doctors suggest that you should exercise quite often to get rid of it. But for myself, I play lots of sports. In school, I play football and soccer. And outside of school, I play select soccer. So I'm very active.
And how about the family history of diabetes? Is that something that is in the family? I mean, people who have this in the family, what percentage would get diabetes?
Well, type 2 is very hereditary within families. It runs in almost every generation. Type 1 is not as hereditary. In our family, it's second born of 3 generations. And it varies. Doctors are still doing studies to see why people are getting type 1 diabetes. There's all types of scenarios out there. Some people think it comes from immunizations that a child gets, and it affects their autoimmune system and weakens it, and so then they contract it. There's different reasons, but in our family it is hereditary.
How would a person know if they were diabetic? I mean, what are the symptoms?
When you're diabetic, your blood sugar goes high sometimes if you don't take insulin. And when this happens, you feel very tired. You can feel nauseous if it gets high enough. You're very thirsty. You'll want to drink a lot. And you have to pee quite often because of all the drinking you do. And when you're low, you feel very weak. Your eyesight can get a little bit blotchy depending on the person. You can start shaking and other stuff like that.
How about high cholesterol? Is that something that would be indicative of a person with diabetes?
It might be for type 2, not necessarily for type 1.
And obesity, is that a cause
That's
as well?
a type 2 cause, yes. But type 1, not necessarily. I was diagnosed at 22 years old, and I was not overweight or anything when I was diagnosed. And actually, when your blood sugar goes high, it causes you lose a lot of weight. And I had lost 20 to 30 pounds in a month before they diagnosed me.
What do you think? What should parents be aware of as a sign that their child might be experiencing a condition of diabetes?
You know, I would say watch your child in how often, if they're very small, they wet their diaper. If they're just wetting through their diaper all the time, ask your doctor. They can do a urine test. It doesn't have to be a blood test to start with. If they're very cranky and they're just not smiling, and you just notice that they just seem lethargic, just ask. Get them diagnosed and get them checked out. Because that's a scary thing when you have a little baby that has to go to the hospital and get insulin, and we just want to be able to help prevent that for other parents.
And you mentioned there are other ways of taking insulin.
Yes.
Could you give us an idea of other ways?
Sure, you can take insulin shots. They have inject pens. You can be on an insulin pump, which are amazing. They work as a pancreas, and you walk around and it automatically pumps insulin into you all the time, and then you program it and tell the pump how many carbs you ate, and it will automatically give you insulin.
So Danny, for example, as long as you're taking your insulin regularly, and you know this very well, and you are very articulate in knowledge about it, do you feel the same as how about your physical activities in school? It doesn't change any of that? I mean, you feel good all the time?
Yes, it doesn't change any of that as long as I take my insulin and do the right amount all the time. But if I don't and I mess up, or I do take too much or not enough, my blood sugar could go high or low, and that will affect my athletics.
And do you take insulin before going to sleep, for example?
Yes, I'll take my long-acting insulin every night before I go to sleep to keep my blood sugar regulated throughout the day for 24 hours.
Oh, excellent. So the long-acting insulin. Oh, great. Well, if there's anything else that you'd like to mention about this, please feel free. If anything else you want to add, but I think you've given the viewing public a lot of information about this. And Danny, you, as I said before, you're very articulate on this, so you know it very well. And thank you guys for being here.
Thank you so much.
I hope that the people learn a lot from this experience. And thank you for watching.